Do you feel undervalued? Do you feel unappreciated? Do you feel like maybe nobody really realizes what you bring to the table, and so even your compensation suffers for it? Today, we're going to talk about how you can actually increase your value to your team, to your company, and ultimately to the marketplace, how you can become more valuable. Welcome to the Shift Podcast. I'm Matt Ware. This is my co-host, Evan Weiland, and we are recording today in the iconic Clock Tower in downtown Denver, right on 16th Street. What an incredible venue to be sitting in today and recording. So grateful for these guys hosting us for this episode. And really what we want to talk about today is how you can become more valuable. And the disclaimer maybe, or the qualifier that I should put on that is we're not talking about your value as a person, as a human being. We're people of faith. So we believe everybody's created in the image of God. You have inherent intrinsic value just because you're breathing, just because you're on the planet. Yep. So we're not talking about that. What we are talking about is the fact that the marketplace values different people in different ways because of their skill sets and their tool sets and their mindsets, and how you actually can grow your value, increase your value, become more valuable from a marketplace standpoint. So Evan, I want to kick it off by you talking about this framework that you have for how we maybe see value in terms of how the marketplace maybe recognizes and rewards it.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to kick it off by talking about the value ladder.
Yeah.
And the value ladder is easy. It's just 4 rungs of the ladder, right? And so it's the worker.
Short ladder.
It's a short ladder. It's just those 4.
It's like a step ladder at home, right?
It's a step ladder. So it's the worker, the supervisor, the strategist, and the visionary.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, all 4 of those different stages of the ladder, they all have different roles to play, different value to the marketplace. Right. So the worker, they are unfortunately at the bottom of the ladder, right? And they're the person who does all the work in terms of using their physical energy or their muscle to accomplish the job, right?
Okay.
Think of a construction worker.
Sure.
The next step is a supervisor, right? They're going to oversee this team of workers. Next is the strategist, the person who is responsible for the high-level planning and everything of the business. And then, of course, the visionary, which you can imagine is the owner or maybe the CEO.
So I think what you're describing is these aren't job titles or even job descriptions per se. These are just sort of the levels of people to get work done, really, in any industry, in any company, and any place in the market, right? So to maybe bring that home and make it resonate for our audience as you're watching and listening, you can think about this in terms of maybe some job titles, right? So the visionary, the person who sits at the top of the value ladder, they really are, like you said, the owner or at the least the CEO, right? They're the ones who have vision to move the organization forward. And so if you're listening, you're watching, and you are a CEO or you are an owner, that probably is the role that you're sitting in, or at least that you want to be sitting in, right? The next one is the strategist, and that probably is somebody who maybe is a VP, maybe they're a department head, maybe they're a general manager, depending on, different industries might classify that in different ways with different job titles. The supervisor, like you said, they're managing a team of people. So that's a team lead. That's a team supervisor or somebody, a manager, somebody like that, who's overseeing work. They're not necessarily doing the work themselves, although many times they have the skill set. A lot of times they became a manager or supervisor because they moved up the value ladder, right?
Right.
Because the people that, like you said, are at the bottom rung of the ladder, and that is in no way, meant to be a slam or a negative thing, but it's just a value proposition. The workers are the ones that are getting their hands dirty, whether that's, literally or figuratively. That's the guy swinging the hammer on the construction site. If it's hospitality, they're doing the setup of tables and chairs. They're doing housekeeping. If this is in the IT space, these are the guys that are actually doing the coding, the engineers. And so regardless of the industry, these are the types of people that you have in just about every company. And again, the marketplace sees those people and what they bring to the table different in terms of value.
Yeah, and Matt, we don't want anyone to think that we're bashing or judging or being the person who's swinging the hammer and doing the hard work. I have tons of background in construction, and there's nothing inherently wrong with being the worker.
Right.
But let me come alongside and kind of nudge or encourage those listening or watching. You probably would be okay with stepping up the value ladder, right?
Yep.
And so let me get philosophical for just a second. I want to challenge this idea of hard work pays off, right?
Okay.
So in the context of the value ladder and that first rung of the ladder being the worker, here's the idea. If this person is using two limited resources, which is number one, their energy, right? Their physical muscles, their energy to do the work.
Right.
And then of course, time, which is also limited. If you take those two things and put them together, you're really only going to get a limited outcome.
Yeah.
It's not going to be an exponential outcome. If you want to make more money in that role or in that rung of the ladder, you just have to work longer hours,
right,
and expend more energy,
yep,
right, to get paid more. It's very limited, right? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, and there's a cap on it, right? Because even if you do work more hours, there are only so many hours that you can work.
Right.
And even if you're really, really good at what you do, and so you get, pay raises and things like that, there still will be a cap on what that particular skill can demand in the industry.
Right.
And so, yeah, at that rung of the ladder, particularly, there's just always going to be a limit on what value the market puts on you, not what value you have as a person, but the value that the market is willing to reward you for. There's always going to be a limit on that. And I think, this would be a good point to bring up here that, I know there are people who are listening and watching who are business owners, entrepreneurs, maybe really small businesses, maybe even just solopreneur. Maybe they're in that stage of their business growth and they're listening to us talk about this and they're like, wait a minute, I'm all of these, right? Like I am the CEO because I own the company and I have to think through the strategy and I have to supervise the work, which a lot of times is just supervising my own work, or maybe a few, contractors or helpers or whatever, right? So if you are at that stage, like the early stages of your entrepreneurial journey, many times the first few months or even years, you kind of are doing it all yourself. And so if you're listening to this, watching this, and you think, man, that's where I'm at, I would just, first of all, normalize that and say there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually just part of the journey. You and I have both been there, still are there with different aspects of our businesses, right? And so there's nothing wrong with that. And you may not be able to even change it immediately. What I would challenge you to do if you're in that spot is, maybe you still have to do the work yourself. You can't leave the worker rung entirely, but maybe what you can do is start to shift the mental and emotional energy that you're expending more toward the higher rungs of the ladder.
Right.
Could you spend more and better time and energy on the visionary and strategist rungs of the ladder, and maybe a little less time or not your best time and energy on the lower rungs of the ladder? That may be a step. When I think about stepping up a ladder, it's as you're climbing a ladder, you have your feet on two different rungs. And at some point you have to shift your weight from one to the other.
Yep.
And so if you're a solopreneur, you probably feel like you're on multiple rungs. I mean, you only have two legs, I suppose, but you're on all four, right? You know what I'm talking about. The analogy breaks down at some point. But I guess, again, what I'm saying is, like, could you just shift your weight? If you have that as a mental picture, could you shift your weight a little bit to the higher rungs of the ladder?
Right.
Yeah.
And, if you're watching, listening, what Matt is saying is really hitting you in the gut. And you can resonate with some of this. Matt and I both run separate consulting practices, and we've both been there.
Yep.
We've had this experience. We ourselves, like Matt just said, are stepping up this rung to the next rung in different areas of our lives, different areas of business. And so if this is something that you would like professional help with, reach out. We'll go ahead and leave a link in the description. Hey, let me take a minute to introduce you to our very first sponsor. These guys are called God Armor. So if you're looking for a faith-based clothing company, something that you can wear that you feel like it really aligns with your values, you're going to want to check them out. We're going to put the website in the description below, along with the promo code. And if you use that promo code at checkout, you're going to get 10% off of your order. Go check them out. They're also a startup, small company just getting started, and we love supporting small local businesses. So again, God Armor, check out the website. You're going to love them.
Something I think that's important to bring into this conversation is the idea that your value in the marketplace has a lot to do with your ability to solve problems, right?
I like that.
Carly Fiorina, legendary, first female CEO of Hewlett Packard, said this. She said, leadership is problem solving. Full stop.
Full stop.
Right? People describe leadership in different ways. That's her definition. Is leadership is problem solving. And the idea is that if you can solve bigger problems, you can move up the ladder, so to speak,
right,
in terms of your leadership influence and your leadership ability. If you're solving small problems, you probably are going to stay at a lower level on the value ladder. You're going to be at a lower level of leadership influence. But when you step up and you begin to solve bigger problems, your leadership influence begins to grow. And that it makes sense when you think about it like that, but I think to bring it into the value conversation is really important, because if you can solve bigger problems, you bring more value to the marketplace. Craig Groeschel, who's one of my favorite leadership podcasters to listen to, and so have been really influenced by him over the years. He says it this way. He says, the level of value you provide is directly proportional to the level of problem you can solve.
Ooh,
okay,
good.
The level of value you provide is directly proportional to the level of problem that you solve. So solve small problems, you have small value in terms of the marketplace. Solve big problems, you bring big value in terms of the marketplace. And so I think the challenge is, if you want to go up the value ladder, solve more problems and solve bigger problems. Craig Groeschel talks about this. He describes his very first job when he was a teenager. He was working at JCPenney, which, if you're a Gen Z or millennial, maybe you don't know JCPenney. We're old enough that we know JCPenney, right? The classic department store. And Craig Groeschel talks about, his first job was sorting coat hangers, right? People check out, and they're getting their clothes, and the cashier throws all of the coat hangers into a big bin, but there are different types of coat hangers for different types of clothing, and his job was to sort through all the coat hangers and put them into the 7 different stacks, the categories for the coat hangers. And he sort of chuckles as he talks about it. He's like, you can imagine the level of problem I was solving, and so the level of pay that I got for sorting coat hangers, right? Moral of the story being, you want to have more value, solve bigger problems, solve more important problems, and maybe not today, but eventually over time, the marketplace always rewards the ability to solve problems.
Yeah. Have you heard the story of the old mechanic on the factory floor?
Yeah.
Right. So this is a fun story. So the story goes, there's a big factory. In the middle of this factory is a giant engine, and the engine goes down. So they call this old man in. He comes in. After a few minutes of inspecting the engine, he takes out a hammer from his tool belt. He smacks the engine, and this thing springs back to life. Right. So a week later, the owner of the factory receives an invoice. Right. He opens it up. He takes a look. He's flabbergasted by the number. Right. So he immediately phones the mechanic and says, can you give me an itemization of this bill? It's $10,000. The mechanic says, sure, right. Swinging the hammer, $2, right? Knowing where to hit the machine, $9,998.
Right, yeah.
And so the moral of the story is, effort pays off, right?
Right.
But solving big problems is way better, right? That's going to immediately increase the value that you have in the marketplace. And frankly, it will directly determine the price that you can charge or demand in the marketplace too.
Yeah, which I think, we all know life is about more than money, but when we talk about value, that is often the currency that's exchanged, is money to provide value. And I think this idea of solving bigger problems means you bring more value. This is not a new concept. This is not like modern business technique. This is something that really spans all of human history. In fact, there's a story in the Bible about this. And, we're both people of faith. I know some of you in our audience are. Even if you're not, this is a story that will sort of highlight this. And there's a lot of wisdom in it. It happens in the book of Exodus. Moses has led the people of Israel out of Egypt. Even if you don't know the biblical narrative, you've seen Prince of Egypt or, Charlton Heston in the 10 Commandments, right? So you have this picture in your mind of a couple million people are out in the wilderness and Moses is leading them, and he's having to kind of navigate and sort of work through all the disputes and the arguments and the challenges that are coming up. And his father-in-law, Jethro, shows up on the scene and he's watching this happen, and he tells Moses, he's like, "You're crazy." He's like, "You can't solve all of these problems for all of these people." He said, "What you ought to do is find some good people who, they got a good head on their shoulders, and let them judge the smaller issues, right? Put them in charge of tens or 50s or hundreds or thousands, and let them solve the problems at that level. And so only the problems that they can't solve get all the way up to you, right? And so, I mean, that's a masterclass on delegation and empowerment and all kinds of things. But for the purpose of this conversation, it really is about problem solving and the idea that Moses's value as the leader, the guy in the number one chair for the people of Israel, came because he was the ultimate problem solver. He solved the biggest problems, therefore he had the most value in the context that they were in, right? And so, if the biblical narrative doesn't work for you, I can give you a modern example of this. Just a few days ago, I was watching a video of Elon Musk, right? So we'll juxtapose these people. You got Musk and Moses, right? Two titans of leadership, right? If you can't get on board with one of them, then that's a you problem, as my kids say. So, but Elon Musk said this. He said, being a CEO really is the distillation of dealing with the worst problems in the company. He said, if you are the CEO, you should not spend any time working on what's wrong or working on what's right. You should spend all your time working on what's wrong. So you don't need to spend time on it. If it's going well, if it's going right, you don't need any energy toward that. You have to direct all of your time and energy into the things that are going wrong. So even someone at his level is saying, listen, the ultimate leadership role is problem solving. And when we talk about value, nobody has been assigned greater value by the marketplace than Elon Musk, right? And it's because of the level of problems that he solves.
Well, I like that too, because no one else in the company can solve that problem. That's why it's being given to him. And that's why he's literally being paid the big bucks.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's interesting. So back in 2015, I worked construction. Interestingly enough, 5 blocks from here, where the crow flies.
Okay.
I was hanging tile on, giant buildings. So
you haven't gotten out much, right? So I haven't gotten. Moral of the story is, in a decade, Evan's still right here.
5 block radius. So it's July, middle of the summer. I'm 30 stories up on what's called the swing stage.
Ugh.
This thing,
No thanks.
this aluminum thing being held by cables. 3 feet by 8 feet.
Right.
No fun. No boy at all. What could go wrong? Yeah. So we're up here and with another individual on this thing. And the reason I'm telling this story is I think back about my supervisor. And this guy was called a walking supervisor, which really meant that when he walked away, the workers would scoff at him, right?
Okay.
Telling us what to do.
Right.
You come get it.
That's usually the way it goes.
You come do it, right?
Yeah.
But another thing I remember about this guy is that he would spend a lot of his time in meetings, air-conditioned meetings, with other heads in the business. And so I thought through this. Every time he would come and check us out, make sure everything's going well. I thought, this guy has a different title. He's in a different role, but he provides different value to that company than I did.
Right.
And because of that, I come to find out he got paid just north of double of what I was making. He's
in air conditioning and making twice as much.
Yeah. It's a really great day to realize all of this. But yeah, that's the story, right? Is that he had a different tool set.
Yeah.
He had a totally different tool set than I did. I mean, the guy was a communicator, and he was able to communicate to 2 different teams, whether it was the workers or the strategists that were above him, and just help create a well-oiled machine. So for those watching, listening, here's a fun exercise, right? So I would encourage you to think of someone that is above you in the value ladder. And I want you to compare yourself to that person, but not in an envious way, okay? More like in a competitive way.
Yeah.
Compare yourself to that person so that you can begin to compete with the tool sets and the skill sets and the mindsets that they have. Because we're not born into a caste system, right?
Right.
Thank God we have this thing where we can figure out how to provide more and more value to the marketplace, or more and more value to the company that you're working for. And you can absolutely grow in that space.
Yeah. Well, and I think that really is what we want to highlight as we're wrapping up today, is the idea that you're not stuck at the level that you're at unless you choose to be, right? You can make the shift, right? That's what this podcast is all about. You can make the shift to go from one rung on the ladder to the next. And so understanding the value ladder, and I think you might have said this earlier, but like once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right. Exactly.
And so there's this idea, like now, as you've watched or listened to this episode, you might be sort of assessing yourself in a different way through a different lens to say, okay, here's the rung that I'm on, but here's the rung that I want to get to. And our challenge, our encouragement would be, you are not stuck. You can do the things that it takes to start stepping up those rungs on the ladder. You can grow in your mindset, in your skill set, in your tool sets to start taking action on those things and to ultimately provide more value to your team, to your company, and to the marketplace. And the primary way that you can do it, or maybe the fastest way you can do it, really is to become a problem solver. Okay. And I would say this for myself, based on my own leadership journey, as well as leading a lot of other people over the years. The people who get more responsibility, more promotion, and ultimately then more compensation are the people who can solve problems. I never liked it when people came to me with problems unless they also had solutions. So that would be, maybe a word of advice to you. Don't bring problems without bringing solutions to somebody who is above you on the value ladder, because that's what they're going to look at. That's what they're going to reward. So your value, it will be directly proportional to the level of problem that you can solve. So, man, as we wrap this up, I guess that'd be the action step for today.
Yep.
Go find a problem to solve, a bigger problem, a scarier problem than maybe what you've tackled before, and just see if that doesn't increase your value proposition, whether it's in the microcosm that you work in today or long-term, in the big picture. So thanks so much for being part of the Shift Podcast community. We are so appreciative of all the support that you guys give us. We'd love it if you would like, share, subscribe, drop us a comment, leave us a question. If there's a topic that you'd love to see us talk about, let us know, and we'll begin to start working that in. But go take action, go solve problems, go step up the rung on the value ladder, and we'll see you next time.